welcome to History Tape number 12 of It Happened in Grand Prairie, and we're bringing you a Thanks for the Memory series. And on this March the 24th, 1986, we have a gentleman that we did not finish with at our taping number 11, and we have brought back Roger Dickey. Roger is a longtime Grand Prairiean, and Roger, we want to continue our interview with you, and we certainly do thank you for coming back to be with us again today.
Well, I enjoyed the last interview we had.
Yes, and I've talked to several people in town that now feel that you are a full-fledged TV star, and they may want to give you an Oscar. Who knows?
Well, I don't think I deserve that.
All right. Roger, you've brought some more memorabilia with you. And first of all, we had thought we would talk about the buildings, but let's talk about your artwork. Last time we talked about your artwork, and we have two of your paintings here. The one in the front that we would like very much to show. And what have you entitled that painting?
Well, I really have not. I just called that
Your Still Life?
Well, it's just a still life with some different blue pots and some flowers.
All right, now I would like for you to hold this one up.
This is a Prairie Island scene.
All right, now don't hold that in front of your face, but let's hold it down where we can pick that up. And this is your artwork of Prairie Island with the gulls and all of the beautiful Gulf in the background. And that's wonderful. And we're so proud of you as an artist. And we just had to take this opportunity of your bringing these two paintings with you so that we could show the people in Grand Prairie that they certainly do have a gifted artist and a past electrician, a past person that worked in radio, television, and many other medias in the commercial field. So thank you very much for showing those to us, Roger. And not only were you an artist, but you and Thelma, your wonderful wife, both were involved in the earlier years in a little theater. And here we are in 1986, and we think we have the first theater group, but surely we didn't. Would you tell us a little bit about this little theater that was in Grand Prairie and some of the things that you all did do for the public?
This is a few of the programs that we had on, just some of the plays that we put on. We started in about 1939, and I think it was about 1940 when we really got underway with presenting some plays. And Billy Turner was not Billy Turner, but Wesley Young, I think, was our second president. Anson Brundage was the first president we had. And Billy Turner was our business manager. And Frank Jarrett was our director that directed all of the different plays. And we put on some 7 or 8 different plays during the time, and what stopped us was the war. World War II come on, and in fact we went out to Camp Walters and put on one of our plays out there for the soldiers.
Which one did you put on for Camp Walters? Do you remember it all?
I can't tell you for sure. Do you have a list of them?
All right, here's the list of all of the ones that you all did.
I think, let's see.
The Petticoat Fever?
I believe that was it.
That looks like the one it might be.
I think that's what Thelma said was the one that we put on out there.
Well, can you name some of the Grand Prairians that still reside in Grand Prairie?
Well, Elizabeth Webb, McElhaney Webb, if I get it right.
All right.
And Sidney Rose Anderson Smith.
Okay.
And Beth Ray Speck McLean.
Good.
And then Thelma and myself. Now, if there's any others I've forgotten. Alice Wagner was one, but she's passed away.
Yes. And
Frank Jarrett has. Wesley Young is in Dallas. He's still living.
Yes.
And so is Sam Spikes Jr. He's up at Lake Kiowa.
All right. Now, I think it would be wonderful if you would hold this one up right in the middle so the camera could get a picture of Sidney Rose Anderson Smith. She still lives in Grand Prairie, and I think everyone ought to see her when she was a budding young actress in the theater here in Grand Prairie back in the earlier days. All right, and here's another that we'd like for you to hold so that we can, would you tell us who those are in that one? Is that the one with your wife,
yes.
Thelma, in this one?
On the left would be my wife, Thelma, and then there's Margaret Spikes, or Martha Spikes, and Frank Jarrett's wife, and Elizabeth Webb.
And Elizabeth McElhaney Webb still lives in Grand Prairie, and is very important to the Dalworth history, right?
She can probably tell you as much about the Little Theater as anybody in town, because she was very active in it.
All right, and speaking of town, there is one of the pictures that I have noted with a great deal of interest. It's one of the few that I have seen here in Grand Prairie, and would you hold that up? That is the community center that was formerly located behind the City Hall Annex. And
that's right.
What all happened? The first that happened in that building, we had our first Rotary Club and...
Well, the Rotary Club met in there for a long time, and the different churches would take turns serving the meals, each one a month at a time.
All right.
And I know we knew about it pretty well, because every time we lived right across the street from it, and the family had about half her kitchen over there after each Rotary meeting during the month that the Presbyterian Church had the program. And the library, in about 1940, the library was moved from Hancock's drugstore into a section that they added on to this little building.
So that was really the first city-sponsored library was in there. The other one was sponsored by the Grand Prairie Study Club?
The Study Club, and the county helped them with it.
I see.
And it was up in a balcony back in Hancock's drugstore.
Well, I remember the day that this building was demolished. We had no notice as a historian.
No.
And when I came down to stop the man with the bulldozer and tell him to just let me take one more picture of that, he wouldn't even stop the bulldozing. And I cried a lot that day because we lost a really wonderful old building. And at that time, we didn't know how to stop them from raising the old buildings.
We didn't. That's true.
But we do now, don't we, Roger? All right, there's something else about downtown. I know many people in Grand Prairie, Texas, do not have the remembrance of when we had parking meters downtown, and you have this old photograph.
We had parking meters for a long time. This view is looking towards the east from, if I'm not mistaken, I was up on top of G.H. Turner's building when I took the picture. And
that's a very good view of the old parking meters along town. Could we park for a penny and a nickel at that time, Roger?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. You have something else that related to the business community that we want to talk about just a little bit, and that's your booklet of the Grand Prairie Community Fair. When did that first start, Roger?
Oh, boy.
A long time ago.
A long time ago.
What number is that?
This particular deal was on the fair in 1936. It was in conjunction with the centennial that was held that year. And a lot of the businesses that are in this, some of them are still here and many of them are gone. But
are you going to allow us to copy this so we can get a list of this for the library, Roger?
But sure I get it back.
Oh, well, we won't borrow it without you going along with us to copy it.
I might not be able to get back home if I let that get away.
All right, there's another one that I know that you're going to enjoy showing. Show us Roger Dickey in the early days, and what were you doing there, Roger?
Well, I made a lighting control panel for the Little Theater, and this is a picture of me at the panel that I made to control the lights for the different plays that we put on.
Tell me about what was your age at that time, Roger?
Oh, boy.
You haven't told us your age yet, have you?
Well, I'm 75.
75, that's a good round number, isn't it? Yes. Okay, and this was back in the 30s or 40s?
Well, it would be in the 40s because it was during the Little Theater.
During the Little Theater time. All right, you brought another picture of memorabilia that is wonderful. I believe that looks like the school board.
This is the different members of the school board that were still living at the time this picture was made. And my dad's picture is in there, and he was on the school board in 1916 to 1918. And
this is the Reverend Dickey right here, isn't it? Isn't this?
Yes, he's on the end right here. And that's my father.
All right, and that was a wonderful tenure for him to serve on the board at that time.
I might tell you a little interesting thing about it. Dad said they didn't have money to pay the teachers, so they give them script so they could go to the grocery store and get groceries until they got enough money to pay them.
I see, and then they would cash in their script when they
got the money.
And then the school board or the school system would pick those up when they got the money together.
When they got the money. They didn't have the money to pay the teachers.
Well, and what year do you think this all happened?
Well, that was 1916, 18.
1916 and 18, during the other World War, the First World War. All right, now, Roger, we've given you and Thelma a very special task, and I know that Thelma has helped you tremendously with this. And I'd like for you to take this sheet, and these are addresses on Main Street, located in the 100 block and that area. And would you read this off to us and talk a little bit about each one of those addresses and what you have in your memory as having been at that location during those times, okay?
Well, most of what we've listed here was about 1937.
All right.
And of course, having lived here long before that, there was other things that was in there prior to that.
All right.
And I've started in here from about 1937.
Okay.
But on the corner where the Sawicki building is now, that was 101 West Main. Roy Reed had a grocery store in the bottom part, and the 101 and a half was upstairs part of the building, and G.H. Turner had his office up there.
How wonderful.
And that was, but I might back up just a little bit, but in the early 1900s, the Wagner brothers had a bank in that same location. My grandfather used to trade with them there, used to bank with them.
And that was the Wagner brothers?
That was Wagner's. I think it...
You know the name of the bank by any
I'm trying to think
time?
of the name of the bank.
Okay.
But I can't. Anyway, it was in that building. It was there for a number of years till they finally moved across the street over on the other corner, opposite corner on Main Street.
Okay.
The next was the city drugstore. At that time, Mr. Cooper rented or owned it.
Mm-hmm.
And
what was that address?
That was 103. That was next to the Sawicki building.
Just west of the Sawicki building.
Yeah. Now, Linda's drapery shop's in that building now.
All right.
And Dr. Copeland had his office in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And for many, many years, well, that's where he had his office. As far as I know, it was there when he retired, was in that building where he had his office. The next building, Mr. J.Y. Page had a variety store.
And what was that address?
Well, that's 105.
And what is located in there now?
What's next?
Is that the one where Mr. Satterwhite used to have his hardware store?
No. Oh, yes, it is. Sure is.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Because it was later, Tom Caldwell had a hardware store there, and Mr. Satterwhite bought him out.
All right.
Now, I might mention one other thing, and I can't give you a date, but at one time, Mr. and Ms. Moulder had a dime store in that same building.
Okay.
And then they later went down on 714, or no, 708, I think it was, Main Street, East Main.
All right.
But then Miss Fannie Long and Mrs. Moore had a cafe along in that area. I've got it listed as 107. I'm not sure if that's right. But later, Tom Powers bought it out, and it was called Powers Cafe.
Wonderful.
And then at 109, Hancock had a drugstore, and that's the one, the library was in the balcony at the back of the store.
And it was a two-story building then?
Well, it wasn't a two-story building, but they had a balcony at the back, and that's where the library, you had some stairs, went up, and the library was up in that balcony until it was moved over behind that little building we showed the picture of.
All right. That was the community center then. All right.
Now then, the next one was Sanders Barber and Beauty Shop, and that was Sam Sanders had the barber shop there, and
do you know the number
I
of
think Louise had a beauty shop along with it.
All right.
And then 113 to 115, it gets a little bit hazy in there because so many things took place. But Mr. Massey had a grocery store there. Mm-hmm. And also, along about that time or before, Mr. Sargent had a little grocery store over there, but I don't remember just which building it was in. I want to say it was right next to Massey's, but I'm not sure.
All right.
And of course, but in '37, when we moved here, he'd already built the building over on the north side and was where he was when he closed it out. Also, in that same area there, George and Monette Manus had a barber and beauty shop in part of that same building. And then in 1952, the Wings Theater was built there. And we had the pleasure of air conditioning that.
And I believe Mr. Jerry Silver.
Jerry Silver and Miss Fisher, Helen Fisher, built it.
All right.
Or say built it, they remodeled the building. Now, along in that same area there, then they had Chapman's Cafe was next, and then I had my little radio shop was the next in line.
All right, and what was the number of your radio
Well, I don't
shop?
have it because we just couldn't come up with it. But anyway, way back there, Mr. Bowen owns some of that property.
All right.
And the building that I was in and the one that the Chapman Cafe was in, I know he owned those. And he had a brother that ran the little shop we was in. He did radio repair, and I don't know, they had a falling out somewhere or other. And anyway, when we came in, we took it over, and that's where we were. But
Now, this Mr. Bowen, was he from Grand Prairie?
Yeah, well, he also had a theater at one time, and it was in, I think, that same building where Chapman's was up until he closed his theater out.
All right.
Because I was talking to Josephine Hughes and said she remembered paying 10 cents to go to the picture show.
Over on the south side of Main Street. Good.
Now, along in that same vicinity there, Buck Morgan had a picture show during the war. And they had a fire and burned up all their equipment up in the projection booth. And Buck could get a hold of some projectors, but he couldn't get any sound equipment. And he was running into me down on the street one day and wanted to know what in the world he could do. And you couldn't buy parts back then. And I told him, I said, well, I think I have enough parts that I could build a sound system for you. And he thought I was just kidding him, but I'd had experience with movie projectors before.
All right.
And I built him a sound system and fixed it all up, and he said that's the best one he ever had in the theater, so I felt real proud about it.
Oh, I guess so. That was wonderful.
And that's the only way he could get it back in operation, because I happened to have the parts on hand that I needed.
All right.
The next was Cunningham's Feed Store. Now, that was about, best we can tell, 123 West Main. Now, this will surprise you, because in 1952, Lynn's Jewelry Store was in there. And also then they sold out to Lowe's Jewelry Store.
All right.
And I'm positive about that because we air conditioned the building for them when Lynn's had the jewelry store.
All right.
Next to that was Markham's Shoe Repair Store.
You have the number of that?
It was about 125, and
All right.
Markham's lived in the back of the building. And we knew all of them quite well.
There are, I know, at least two of the Markhams that still,
Yeah.
or maybe three that still live in Grand Prairie,
Yeah.
Texas. One is a bail bondsman
Yeah.
over in Oak Cliff or Pleasant Grove, and the other, I believe,
Well,
maybe
Harvey
he
was
retired.
one of the boys. He did live out off of Egyptian where it winds around out
Yes.
there.
All right.
All right, then the Chapman Syrup Factory was next. And that was later where Mr. Turner had his
Insurance office?
insurance office.
Well, did they actually manufacture the syrup
They made
there?
syrup.
They made the syrup
They sure
there.
did. You could smell it all over that end of town.
They had their furnaces and
They
their...
cooked it. They did everything there. They made syrup.
Do you know how long that was, that period?
Well, it was up until pretty near to the war, and then they had trouble getting sugar, and so I think he more or less had
Was this ribbon cane or sorghum syrup?
They made both.
They made both.
And now, then from that, there was a vacant space between that and the corner, and I said it was a vacant lot. It really wasn't, because Bill's Cafe was on the corner, and it was a little white building, and a little wooden building, and you could drive all the way around it. So
I
I'm
see.
sure it was just one area, and Bill just had the little cafe.
And you said it's Bill's Cafe. Can you give me Bill's last name? Because
Langford.
Langford.
Bobby Langford's daddy.
Bobby Langford's dad used to be our fire chief,
That's right. And you could get the best meal in town for 25 cents. In fact, he's got an ad in that little fair book there on the meals for 25 cents.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Now then, where Bill's Cafe was, right behind it is where the city hall was. It was a little old concrete block building, and the jail was in the back of it.